sometimes I bring something in, he'd go, well, there you are, that's it. And it was nice, I just got the stamp of approval.
There are certain moments in life that even time refuses to soften. Moments that stay hidden behind the smiles, the success, and the stories we think we already know. And for Paul McCartney, one of the most celebrated musicians in history, there's a particular weight he admits he still carries, even after all these years. It's not fame or pressure or the shadow of the Beatles. It's something far more human, something heartbreakingly personal. You see, beneath the legendary concerts and iconic melodies lives a man who has lost more than most people realize. A man who's experienced triumphs on the world's biggest stages while battling quiet storms no one could hear. And recently, he opened up in a way fans weren't expecting, softly, honestly, almost like he finally allowed himself to say something he's kept tucked away for decades. The surprising part? His confession isn't about regret or failure, or even the past itself. It's about a lingering ache he never figured out how to let go of, and the memories that continue to shape his life in ways the world never sees. And once you hear what he revealed, you might never look at him the same way again. What makes Paul's recent confession even heavier is that his pain didn't begin in adulthood. It started long before the world ever knew his name. And understanding this early loss is important, because it creates a straight line to the emotional weight he still talks about today. His story begins in Liverpool when he was just 14. Most kids at that age worry about school, friends, or weekend plans. Paul was suddenly confronted with a reality he wasn't prepared for. His mother's passing. It happened quietly, without long conversations or emotional goodbyes. The McCartney household didn't sit around discussing feelings or fears. Instead, everything was handled with silence and a kind of forced strength. One day she was there, and then without ceremony, she wasn't. Paul has described how strange it felt to lose someone so central to his life, without even being given the chance to fully understand what was happening. That silence turned grief into something private, something he carried alone. And because the loss came during the most formative part of his life, it left behind a complicated mix of memory and emptiness. Years later, he admitted something that stunned fans. He can't clearly remember his mother's face. Not because he didn't love her, but because trauma blurred the details over time. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine losing someone you adore, and then slowly feeling the sharpness of their image fade. That kind of loss creates a quiet ache, an ache that sinks into the background, but never disappears. This early wound became part of who he was. The longing, the confusion, the lingering questions, all of it shaped his heart long before the Beatles, long before fame, long before the world saw him as unshakable. And that's why, when he later found love again, it meant more to him than people ever realized. And that's exactly why meeting Linda felt like stepping out of the dark. If his childhood loss left a hollow space inside him, Linda was the first person who brought warmth back into that empty corner. Their connection didn't look like the chaotic, glamorous romances people expect from celebrities. Instead, it felt grounded, almost ordinary, in the best possible way. She wasn't dazzled by fame, and he wasn't performing for her. Their relationship felt like breathing fresh air after years underground. Linda had a way of making life feel real. Not the kind of reality that comes with schedules or responsibilities, but the kind filled with small joys. Cooking together, raising children, taking slow walks on their farm. No spotlight, no stage, just two people choosing each other every day. And that simplicity became Paul's safe place. She took photographs of their everyday life. Not posed, not glamorous, just moments. Real smiles, real warmth, real love. Those images didn't just decorate their home. They documented the life he always wanted, but never had the chance to build until she came along. For years, the quiet harmony they shared softened the memory of everything he had lost. She was the presence that steadied him, the friend who listened, the partner who believed in him when fame became overwhelming. With her, he didn't feel like a surviving son from Liverpool trying to outrun his grief. He felt like a whole person. But life has a way of changing just when things feel most complete. And as their bond grew stronger, an unexpected shadow crept into their world. One that would test everything he had rebuilt. Because the peace Linda gave him would soon collide with another painful chapter he never saw coming. That shadow became impossible to ignore when Linda received her diagnosis. And just like his childhood experience, this new fear came with a familiar sting. The feeling of being powerless, of watching something precious slip through his hands. But unlike before, he wasn't a confused teenager anymore. He was a husband, desperately trying to protect the person who had given him back his sense of home. They fought alongside each other, hoping for the best, refusing to let fear win. Paul has said many times that Linda was incredibly strong. Someone who faced challenges with quiet courage instead of collapsing under them. She continued living, loving, creating, even while the world around them started to feel uncertain. But strength doesn't always change fate. And in 1998, the unthinkable happened. The woman who brought light back into his life was suddenly gone. The aftermath shattered him. It wasn't just grief. It was a kind of emotional collapse that left him unable to find his footing. He admitted that he cried on and off for nearly a year, struggling to adapt to a world that no longer included her presence. Every room felt too quiet. Every normal routine felt wrong. Every memory stung. What made it even more painful was how sudden the shift felt. One moment, they were fighting with hope. The next, he was walking through life as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. Losing Linda reopened every old wound he had ever tried to bury. The childhood ache of losing his mother, the loneliness of fame, the weight of public life. Everything resurfaced at once, creating an emotional storm he couldn't escape. And while the world continued celebrating his music, his success, his legacy, he was battling a kind of silence that no applause could break. But as time moved forward, something unexpected happened. His grief didn't fade the way everyone told him it would. Instead, it changed shape. What he discovered in the years after Linda's passing wasn't healing, it was something more complicated. Pain doesn't vanish, it settles. It becomes part of you, woven into your voice, your memories, your choices. And for Paul, the lingering ache took on a new form. It wasn't loud or dramatic anymore. It was quiet, subtle, persistent, almost like a shadow that followed him into every stage of his life. There were days when he tried to push through it, pouring himself into music, work, or family. Creativity offered him temporary escape, somewhere to place the emotions he didn't want to say out loud. But grief has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. A photo, a melody, a memory, even just a moment alone. All it took was a small trigger, and suddenly he'd feel that familiar heaviness again. With time, he also began to notice something strange. Memories of his mother were fading even more. The details were softer, the images blurrier, almost as if time was quietly erasing pieces of his past while leaving the pain untouched. It troubled him deeply. Because how can the heart remember the hurt so clearly, yet forget the face that created the love? This realization led to the confession fans found so unexpected. He said he still carries the pain, not out of sadness, but because it's part of who he is. The losses he endured didn't harden him. They made him more human, more reflective, more aware of the fragility of life. And that vulnerability is what makes his music feel timeless. But beneath all that wisdom and resilience, one truth remains. Some wounds don't disappear. They simply become quieter companions. And as he continued to navigate life, that quiet ache would shape what came next in ways no one could see. As the years unfolded, that quiet ache didn't stay isolated to his personal life. It intertwined with his career in ways few people truly understand. To the world, Paul McCartney has always seemed unbreakable. The smiling Beatle, the creative genius, the man who turned melodies into history. But beneath that image lived a far more fragile story, one shaped by conflict, doubt, and a pressure that almost swallowed him whole. It started long before Linda's passing, back when the Beatles themselves began falling apart. The world saw a band splitting up. Paul felt something else entirely. He later admitted that during those final years, he felt emotionally lost, disconnected from the music that once filled him with purpose. And when the breakup finally happened, the fallout was brutal. Fans blamed him. Critics doubted him. Newspapers painted him as the villain. Yet what hurt more than the headlines was the chaos happening behind the scenes. Legal disputes consumed his life. Friendships fractured under the weight of fame, money, and mistrust. The unity that once felt unbreakable dissolved into separate paths. For someone already carrying childhood grief, this new kind of loss hit hard. It wasn't just a band ending, it was a family tearing apart. And instead of finding peace afterward, he found himself sinking deeper into an emotional fog he didn't know how to escape. Even as he created new music and built new dreams with Linda, that old insecurity lingered. Fame doesn't comfort you when the spotlight turns off. Awards don't quiet the questions that echo in the dark. And despite the world calling him a legend, he struggled with feeling like he'd failed the people closest to him. This internal battle became another layer of the pain he carried, one that shaped the man who would one day make that heartfelt confession. Because when someone loses so much, so young, and then faces emotional battles as an adult, the wounds don't just stack, they blend into one quiet, lifelong weight. And that weight revealed itself fully in his most vulnerable admission yet. All of these experiences, childhood loss, the collapse of the Beatles, losing Linda, began to overlap in his heart. And eventually, Paul reached a point where he could no longer keep those feelings locked away. That's when he finally opened up, speaking with a softness that caught people off guard. Because this time, he wasn't telling a story for the spotlight. He was sharing something he'd carried in silence for decades. He admitted that even now, after all the years, he still feels that lingering ache deep inside him. Not constantly, not every day, but enough to remind him of everything he's lived through. And what surprised people most was how calmly he shared it. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't broken. He just acknowledged a truth he had spent years learning to accept. There were rumors circulating online that he still experiences moments where he doesn't recognize the man he sees in the mirror. Moments where he feels like that young boy from Liverpool again, the one who lost his mother and never got a proper goodbye. While these claims remain unverified, they align with something he himself has said many times. The past never fully leaves you. Memories soften, but emotions stay. And that emotional imprint is something he has learned to live with rather than deny. He described it like carrying a small stone in his pocket. It doesn't weigh him down constantly, but every now and then he feels it. A reminder of where he's been, what he's lost, and the love that shaped him. What made his confession so powerful wasn't just the honesty, it was the acceptance. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He wasn't reopening old wounds. He was simply acknowledging that pain doesn't disappear, even when life moves forward. And that honesty opened the door to a larger truth about how he lives with that burden today. What keeps Paul grounded isn't the fame or the legacy, it's something far more human. The small rituals, the creative habits, and the quiet reflections that help him carry everything he feels without becoming overwhelmed. For him, healing has never meant forgetting. It has meant learning how to hold his memories gently instead of tightly. Music has always been his emotional outlet. Whenever words felt too heavy to say out loud, he put them into melodies. Some of his most heartfelt songs weren't written for the charts. They were written to help him process everything life threw at him. Writing became his way of mourning, remembering, and letting go, all at the same time. And through his creativity, he found a sense of clarity that talking couldn't always provide. He also leaned into the life he built outside the spotlight. The moments spent with family, the long walks, the quiet conversations, the grounding presence of people who knew him as Paul, not as a legend. They helped him piece together a life that felt real again, one that allowed him to move forward without erasing what came before. But what truly shaped his journey was a realization he came to slowly. Pain doesn't need to vanish for you to feel whole. Sometimes the things that hurt us become reminders of how deeply we've loved. And instead of treating his grief as something to fight, he began treating it as something to honor. That shift allowed him to keep going, not by escaping the past, but by carrying it with grace. And that perspective shaped the quiet, powerful message at the heart of his confession. When you step back and look at Paul's life, it's easy to see the awards, the successes, the sold-out shows. But behind all of that is a story built on resilience, love, heartbreak, and a quiet strength that never asks for praise. His confession wasn't dramatic. It was human. It was a reminder that grief doesn't follow a timeline, that loss doesn't vanish with success, and that even icons carry scars beneath their smiles. Paul McCartney isn't defined by the pain he carries, but he also doesn't pretend it's gone. Instead, he lives with it, learns from it, and lets it keep him grounded. And maybe that's what makes his story resonate with so many people. Because we all have memories that linger. We all have moments that shaped us in ways we can't ignore. His journey shows that healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about finding a way to move forward with it. And sometimes the strength we admire in others comes from the battles we never see.